Hi, this is your host, Lori Moilov with the Limitless Podcast. And today I have Bob Weis, who has spent 40 years at Walt Disney Imagineering, also was president of Walt Disney Imagineering. And I was reading your book. I have it right here, Dream Chasing.
Oh, great. Thank you.
My mom got it for me for the holidays. And I was like, this has been such an exciting book because also being a fellow Imagineer, digging into some of the stories, your story and your book really kind of captures the essence of Imagineering. And I know that there's inside of Imagineering, there's an Imagineering book. And I feel like yours kind of even goes a deeper dive into what it's like being an Imagineer and like the hurdles and challenges. And I was wondering, my one main question with the book is kind of what inspired this, dream chasing, the essence, the zeitgeist of how it started.
Well, first of all, I got to get together with you in person so I can sign your book.
I can't wait.
I never really thought about writing a book, and I never, was much of a writer, not from college, I would say. And during COVID, I started writing, and we were doing so many Zoom calls and things that I needed a kind of a creative outlet. So I actually first wrote a book about the Haunted Mansion called Ghost Dog, which is also on Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
It's about a kid who's on the Haunted Mansion and a ghost dog follows them home. And it's about their life with this ghost dog. And about halfway through Ghost Dog, I started talking to Disney Editions about possibly doing a book about my career. And I said, I just don't think there's anything interesting to talk about. And she said, you only have to write 250 pages. And I said, there's no way I can't even write an email. What about 250 pages? And of course, as you can see, Dream Chasing turned out to be about 400 plus. So, but I got into the idea that it wasn't about me. It was about the creative process and people who are committed. We often say, Lori, that, follow your dreams. And I started thinking, well, you don't really follow your dreams. You chase them. If you really want to make something happen, you have to really believe it. You have to chase it for a long time, usually. And as you know from Imagineering, and a lot of your audience knows, you don't just chase it, but you have to get a lot of people to chase it with you, right? They have to believe in you too. So that's what it became. And it became a sort of case studies of the most interesting stories that I could put out, that I could think of that express that.
Yeah. And something that was really interesting in reading some of the vignettes and stories is that you had a lot of mentors along the way. I think of your professor at Cal Poly. And I was wondering if you could talk about in that, how that sparked some of your creativity and your evolution in your career.
Well, and it's the same with everybody. I think you run into people who care about you along the way or encourage you. And you never forget that. You're right. I had a fantastic instructor that gave me advice about design and the profession in college. I had other professors like that. And when I got to Disney, we were in 1980, so many of us joined that year or the year before. And it was because Imagineering was gearing up to do Epcot and Tokyo Disneyland at the same time. And they had never done anything of that extent. And it was a little company that was used to working on Disneyland and the World's Fair. So all these kids came in. I'm serious. We were kids out of college, just like a lot of people probably listening. And we were mentored by Claude Coates, Ex Atencio, and Bill Martin and Marty Sklar and those people, and John Hench and Harriet Burns and Joyce E. Carlson. I can't even name them all. But first of all, what a privilege it was to have those mentors. And then you look back and you think how lucky I was to be able to, have an office next to Sam McKim, who started out as a child actor and spent, 50 years at Imagineering, or to sit in a meeting with John Hench and Marty Sklar. We were scared to death. But, now we look back and we think those little moments, how golden they were. And, these folks were not famous back then. Nobody knew who Marty Sklar was or who John. It was a very hidden thing, and it's not since Leslie Iwerks' book and her series, her wonderful series on Disney Plus and things like that. And the Disney Channel. A lot of you grew up on the Disney Channel, right? Seeing the behind the scenes stuff. Back then, they were just very modest people. They didn't, and we're all still pretty modest. I think we're all pretty humble about it. But you didn't think, here's Ex Atencio, and he wrote, yo ho, yo ho, and his office is next to mine. We're just chatting over coffee. I wish I could go back in time. I wish I could go back in time and ask them all more questions, because what an amazing group of people. But what a privilege to be mentored by them. And I treasure everything. And in the book, I kind of managed to remember a lot of things they said and tried to repeat as wherever I could, because they are such great memories.
Yeah. Speaking of going back in time, my question is like, if you could go back in time and talk to Bob that was at Cal Poly or starting out in his career, what kind of advice would you give on the creative side, and maybe some of the things you've learned, because you've had 40 years of working at Imagineering in a creative space and creating creative rides, spaces. What is some of that
Well,
that you would give that?
I'll just clarify. I don't have 40 years of Imagineering. I have about 30,
Yeah.
35. But you're right. I have 40 in the business.
Yes.
So I definitely a senior member of the profession. But, if I went back to that Bob, I would say, it'll sound corny. I'll quote Zootopia. Try anything. And sometimes I would think, well, I really want to be creative, but I'm working as a coordinator, or I'm working, more kind of interpreting drawings for other people, but I didn't really get to do the drawings. And what I really want to do is do the drawings. And I get kind of frustrated about that at times. And when I think back, you don't have the ability to think back then, but now I do, is everything added up. Everything eventually adds up to who you become. And if you excel at everything anybody asks you to do, I always tell people, don't say no to anything either. I remember when Epcot was finished, I had just come back from Tokyo. I built this whole, was involved in this team that built this whole first park outside the US. And it gave me an assignment. It was called Color and Fun. I just hated that terminology. Now I'm in charge of color and fun. I took myself so seriously that color and fun just didn't sound serious enough. And what it was they thought that the outside of Future World was dry. Guests were complaining. It was just kind of boring. The shows were great, but out and around, it didn't have the richness of Disneyland. So eventually I got into it, and I put flamingos in the lake. Our team put up banners. We put up colorful sculptures and things. And I eventually got up to it, but I did have this time of like, what am I going to do? And now I think back and I think, take anything, do whatever. And I say that to people who are coming out of school too. I work a lot with students coming out of school, and I say, start anywhere. I'm sure you'd love to be at Imagineering. You'd love to be at Universal Development. There's lots of places you'd love to be, ILM, animation, whatever. But go wherever you can get experience and just be excited about it. And I just think it always pays off to do that.
Yeah, so true, because it all kind of accumulates over time, all the different experiences, and they kind of add value. And sometimes you don't realize it when you're like then in the circumstance and you're like, oh, wait, something I did like 5 years ago actually is applicable, but I really thought it wouldn't be.
I didn't know until I pulled it back. And the other thing is that I'd say that the world moves around a lot more now than it did when I started. The idea that you necessarily stay at the same place for 35 years and don't have breaks in the middle and stuff like that. I think it's more, we all have to be more portable now, or more movable. Mm-hmm. But the way I like to tell people is to think about that is that you are you. Yes, you might be an Imagineering, you might be something else, but you are you. You are the sum total of your experience. So if you move on because you decide to move on, or they run out of work and so you move over to another company or something, you're still who you are. Your work is not defined by where you're working. It's defined by you as a team member working on great projects. And you should always feel good that the next adventure is just you don't know where it's going to take you. That's what's exciting about it.
Yeah, totally true. It's kind of like jumping on a ride. You just don't know. And there's a lot of unknown. And
a lot of bumps and hills. And
yeah. And I know like even in your book here, like the thing that you highlighted too is like there were failures. And I was wondering, what was one of your creative failures that maybe sparked more creativity, and how did you solve it with creativity?
Well, I think one of the we worked on an idea for a second park in Tokyo for a very long time. And I loved Tokyo Disneyland at the time. Was kind of like my second home, because I lived over there for for a few years and traveled for several years. And so I had finished the Disney MGM studios in Florida, and Michael Eisner and Frank Wells both thought we should build one in Tokyo. We worked hard on it. We collaborated with Oriental Land Company. We had a great team. We did everything we could possibly do to make that the right park for our second park in Tokyo. And finally, after lots of iterations and presentations and work and everything, they finally came back and said they didn't like it. It said we're so Disney and we're so ingrained with Disneyland that the whole idea of showing people stuff behind the scenes just doesn't appeal to us. And so we had put a lot of work in, and we came back. We put it all on hold. Everybody's kind of sad for a minute. We're sad for a minute. And then we got together as a little team after hours, and we said, we're not going to give up. We're going to keep going. And that's where Tokyo Disney Seas came from. It came out really quickly because we had an idea of what Oriental Land Company wanted, what we were trying to do, what Michael Eisner was trying to do. And we rebounded very quickly, but in a space of a few weeks. So in that case, the energy of failing at that just gave us more energy to say we're not going to give up. And it's nice when you have that. And I think a big part of failing, certainly failure is a great way to learn it, and that, but your team supports you. We're all in this together. Some things we open, they work. Sometimes they don't. We don't have the luxury of just like it opens as a movie and then it goes away next weekend. It sits there. It's there forever. So the smartest thing to do if you find something that's not working is to, fight real hard to figure out how we're going to make this better. How do we, solve whatever problem we have? And we have to go in there in the middle of the night, and sometimes and reprogram or whatever it is. But we're all very dedicated to the guests, right? We want them to have the best experience possible. And so even if something's not working the way we want, we're always wanting to go in there and just, okay, what did we learn from it? Now, how can we make it better?
Very true. Yeah. And in collaboration and stuff, my question for you is like, where's your favorite creative space, whether that's recharging or just finding an immersion of getting creative? Where is that space for you?
Well, I certainly am very energized, have always been really energized by group collaboration. So I love charrettes. I love getting in a room with a bunch of people and putting up ideas and stuff like that. And I'll tell you, there's times when we're setting up a charrette, putting the boards in the room and stuff like that, when I think to myself, I don't want to do this again. I don't want to go in there with all those people and spend 3 days trying to pretend we're brilliant. And it can be kind of drudgery to go in there sometimes. For me, I never told anybody this before. I'm telling you. And then once I get in there, I get completely energized by the other people. You get energized, and the best charrette, I think, is where everybody comes out with a ton of energy about something. And if you asked whose idea it was, you have no idea. It was just, I started it, somebody else added to it, somebody else added to that. It's an amazing creative process. And it's amazing that you can put one of my old bosses, Randy Bright, who's a star in storytelling at Epcot, things like that. He used to say, put them all in a room, lock the door, and pass food under the door. Don't let them out until they're ready to, have an idea. And that's really kind of what it is. And the pressure, I think, like a 2-week charrette is not a great thing, I don't think. A 3-day charrette, 2-day charrette, those are really great, I think, because you feel a sense of pressure that you have to deliver something. You're in there, you want to do something. And I think the pressure adds to the creativity of it. But I also like, for me creatively, if you talk about restoration of my own creative abilities, I try meditation when I'm under pressure. I love to travel. And what I get from travel is different kinds of food, language, art, architecture, landscaping, all those things. I feel like travel is really great for creative people to see outside of their normal daily life, right? I have a big cactus garden in front of my house that I grew all from cuttings. It's a huge, big garden, but I always grew cuttings like from the gas station, stuff like that.
That's so cool.
So I love seeing the growth of those plants and how resilient they are to almost anything. So, things like that. I love to cook. I cook a lot. I read a lot too. I think reading is, for me at least, is something I really didn't do earlier in life. And I
Mm.
read all the time now. And it takes me, refreshes my creativity, I think.
Yeah. No, I see that. Like reading a book like yours, it sparks the dreamers in us all. I know, like, I'm going to do a rapid fire trivia round
Okay.
right now. So I guess favorite place to be creative. You could say one or two words.
Next to the ocean.
Awesome. Yeah. What about, okay, favorite creative food?
Oh, pasta.
Wow. Okay. And then,
I mean, to make me feel creative, or the
yeah,
most
yeah.
creative kind of food. Food that
Oh,
makes me feel creative is I'd say Italian. It's energetic and it's fun and there's a lot of motion. So the great meals I've had, places like Rome and stuff like that, it just feel good about life.
favorite place creatively to travel?
Creatively to travel. I only can have one.
Okay, maybe two or three.
Okay. I love wandering in Japan and I love Shanghai, probably Asian places. I also love Venice. I love cities, put it that way. The one word
Mhm.
answer would be I love cities, New York, Shanghai, Tokyo, Venice, because they're so rich with food and art and everything. And the more crowded, the better. That's what I like.
And what about favorite activity that gets you creative?
Favorite activity gets me creative. Hands-on, real life people. I use Zoom because we have to use Zoom, but there's nothing like a room full of people, real people with index cards and markers and pens and sketches and just nothing else like it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Zoom has been kind of our supplement during the
It's better than
pandemic. And
nothing. It's
yeah,
better than nothing. It's better than nothing. But when you're trying to be creative, it's really an advantage if you're all in a room together. And
yeah.
messy pens, markers, little weird sketches and stuff. It's just really a creative process.
Yeah, that's one of the aspects I really love about creativity is it's kind of messy and it's not like linear, like it kind of is all over the place. When you jump into creativity and collaboration, I mean, that's maybe one of the things that I really loved about Imagineering the most was how collaborative, we'd all just,
Yeah.
try to come with solutions and stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you totally.
So I always ask each of my guests to tell me one word that connects them to creativity. And I was wondering what that one word is for you.
I don't know if this is an English word. I hope it is. Fearlessness or fearless. That you can't be questioning yourself all the time. You especially in the early creative process, it's easy to kill ideas right there because they're so young and then it's like just growing out of the shell or whatever. And what you want to do is just kind of fly with it. And I always tell, a lot of times you'll have a client in there or something will say, well, we tried that 20 years ago and it didn't work, or that sounds too expensive, and you kind of take them aside and you say, look, in this charrette, we're only here for 2 days. Don't say no. Don't criticize. Let's just put them all up because you don't really know where it's going to go. So you kind of have to be fearless about it and just put the craziest ideas up there. Sometimes you'll have introverted people who are a little bit afraid to speak up. You want to encourage everybody to just try to let it all loose, go for it, and be fearless.
Yeah, I love that. And where can some of our listeners, I know like I have your book here, and I realized that because like when I was looking at it, I realized that also Mike Iwerks did some of the artwork and so,
Yeah.
Grace Lee and Winnie Ho. So I was like, oh wow, like I was like, I know some of
You
these
know all
folks.
those folks. Well,
Yeah.
let me tell you, Lori, it is such, I did not expect to be it's such a gratifying experience to have a book. It feels like an old-fashioned thing to have a book, right? But it feels like people really like to have books. They like to have physicalization. And I just finished an audiobook too. So I know some people are consuming it by audiobook, but the moment that I have with you, for a few minutes to sign a book, talk about it. I've done book signings and all over. I did them on the Disney Treasure a few weeks ago. I've done them in Disney World. I've done them in New York and Boston and San Francisco, and Nashville, and so many places. And it's really magic because people really care about Disney. They care about Imagineering, and those few moments, I've had magical moments with people over a book signing. People who had cancer, who took their kids to Disneyland because they had promised them for years they were going to take them, and it was so important to them. So it's been a moving experience for me to have the book out and to have Disney behind it, and the other book to Ghost Dog. It's just that's all I want to do now is write. I'm writing this brand new book about Marty Sklar, which is a huge book that's going to have all of his papers and collections and all the doodads and notes and everything he collected over the years. So having fun with that, and so it's a wonderful process. It's a kind of a quiet process compared to all my career, which was so active with lots of people. It's kind of fun now at this stage in my life to have a lot of quiet time. So I enjoy it, but I also love going out and signings. And if anybody's listening and they can get a book and they can figure out how to get it to me, I will sign it. I'll sign any book for anybody. I love it. I'm so grateful. I'm just so grateful to people for taking a look at the book.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful, Bob, for having you on the Limitless podcast. And I know our listeners are beyond inspired. And I know you've probably ignited some new dream chasers along the way.
I hope so.
And like for us, our goal is to keep people creative and inspired and lifted, even in difficult times. And I'm just so thankful, Bob, that you came on the podcast, and we're grateful to have you. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for everything you do, Lori. That's very inspiring that you do that. And just, tell people, shoot me a note. Tell me about what their dreams that they're trying to pursue. I love hearing positive, aspirational ideas from people who are full of energy and optimism. So that's great. And thank you, Lori.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited for our listeners, and they're going to just dig into the book. And I know the one thing I don't want to spoil for our listeners is I found out what your favorite ride is. But at the beginning of the podcast, if you listened, you may know what ride that is, which is your favorite. Or did it change? Because I don't know. In the book, it's different.
It's all over the place. It's all over.